On the day of her engagement, 20-year-old Lila Garcia stands in front of the mirror in an elegant dress, but instead of joy, she feels anxiety. An anonymous letter threatens to reveal her secret, that she allegedly stole money from her former boss. Her fiancé knows nothing, and in an hour she will meet his influential family. What should she do? Run away or fight for the truth? Lila Garcia stood in front of the large mirror in her small apartment on the outskirts of Miami. She was only 20 years old, but today she looked older than her age. The elegant ivory dress she had bought between paychecks accentuated her slender figure. Her hair, dark and shiny like the sea under the moon, was neatly styled in soft waves. She smiled at her reflection, but the smile was forced. In an hour, she had a meeting that could change her life. Dinner with the parents of Miguel Ramirez, her fiancé. His family lived in the affluent Coral Gables neighborhood, where houses were surrounded by greenery and cars cost more than Lila could earn in a decade. This was her chance to prove that she was worthy of their son. But instead of anticipation, anxiety built up in her chest like a cloud before a storm. She adjusted her dress and picked up her purse when her gaze fell on the table. There was an envelope, plain, white, with no return address. Lila frowned. She had found it under her door that morning, but in her haste had not opened it. Now something told her this was not just a note from a neighbor. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and pulled out a piece of paper. There were only a few lines printed on it. You stole money from Sunrise. We know the truth. If you don't want everyone to find out, get ready to pay. We'll be in touch soon. Lila froze. Her heart was beating so fast that she felt like it was about to burst out of her chest. Sunrise was the cafe where she had worked as a waitress a year ago. She had quit after a strange incident involving money going missing from the cash register, but she had never taken a cent. She had been accused, but without any evidence, the case had been closed. Or so she thought. Lila dropped the letter on the table as if it had burned her hands. Who wrote this? And why now, on the day she was supposed to meet Miguel's family? She glanced at the clock. There was less than an hour left before dinner. She had to go, but her legs wouldn't move. She remembered how a year ago, the manager of Sunrise, Cruz, had looked at her with contempt when she refused to sign some suspicious papers. $500 had gone missing, and he had hinted that she was to blame. Lila left without arguing. She was too afraid of getting in trouble with the police. Her modest life was already hanging by a thread. The daughter of immigrants, uneducated, with endless rent debts. But now her past was coming back like a ghost to destroy her future. The doorbell made her jump. It was Miguel, tall, with warm brown eyes and a smile that made Lila melt. He entered the apartment with a bouquet of lilies. Are you ready, sweetheart? Mom and Dad are waiting. They're a little nervous, but I told them you'd win them over, he said, hugging her. Lila forced a smile, hiding the letter in her purse. Yes, almost ready. Just give me a minute. She couldn't tell him now, not before dinner. Miguel was her rock, the man who saw more in her than just a poor waitress. They met by chance when he walked into the cafe where she was working. He ordered a coffee and then joked that her smile was the best dessert on the menu. They had been inseparable ever since. But his family, they were different. Rich, influential, with high expectations. What would they think if they found out about the letter? On the way to Coral Gables, Lila was silent, staring out the car window. Miguel was talking about wedding plans, but her thoughts were far away. She remembered Victor, his cold stare, his sharp voice. He had always seemed like the kind of man who didn't forgive insults. Was it really him? And what did he want now? Money? Revenge? The car turned onto a wide street lined with palm trees and stopped in front of a large house with white columns. We're here, Miguel said, squeezing her hand. Lila nodded, but inside she felt her stomach clench. She got out of the car and suddenly noticed a dark silhouette across the street. A man in a gray jacket was standing by a lamppost, staring straight at her. When their eyes met, he turned away and quickly walked away. Lila felt a chill down her spine. This was no coincidence. Dinner started awkwardly. Miguel's mother, Isabella, with her perfect hairstyle and pearl necklace, looked at Lila with polite but cold interest. His father, Carlos, a businessman with a stern face, was mostly silent, occasionally asking questions about her family. Are your parents from Miami too? He asked, cutting a piece of steak. Lila hesitated. No, they moved here from Mexico. They live in Texas now, helping relatives. It was a half-truth. Her parents were barely making ends meet, but she didn't want to go into details. Isabella raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Where did you go to school? Lila swallowed. I didn't finish college. I worked to support myself. There was a pause. Miguel tried to lighten the mood. Lila is very hardworking. She's at a new company now, working in marketing. But Lila could see that his words didn't convince her parents. Suddenly, her phone vibrated in her purse. She apologized and stepped into the hallway, feeling her palms sweat. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. You didn't tell Miguel about Sunrise, did you? You better hurry, or we will. Lila almost dropped her phone. They knew where she was. They knew who she was with. This wasn't just blackmail. They were following her. She looked back, expecting to see the man in the gray jacket, but the hallway was empty. Only the shadows from the chandelier flickered on the walls, mocking her fear. Back at the table, Lila could hardly concentrate. Isabella was talking about a charity ball, but her words sounded like distant noise. Miguel noticed how pale she was and whispered, "Are you okay?" She nodded, but her voice trembled. "Yes, just tired." Dinner dragged on endlessly, and every glance from Carlos seemed like condemnation. When dessert was served, Lila realized she couldn't keep quiet. If this letter reached Miguel through someone else's hands, he wouldn't believe her. But how could she tell him without losing him? And who was this stranger who was watching her? Leaving the house, she noticed the shadow across the street again. The man in the gray jacket was standing under a tree, not hiding. Lila clenched her fists. She didn't know who he was, but she felt that this was only the beginning. Her past had come back to destroy everything she had built, and if she didn't find a way out, her dreams of marriage and a future with Miguel would turn to ashes. But Lila wasn't going to give up, not after everything she'd been through. A decision formed in her mind. She would find out who was behind this and prove her innocence, by legal means, even if it meant risking everything. Lila sat in Miguel's car, staring out the dark window as the lights of Miami flashed by. Dinner with his parents was over, but the tension in her chest was only growing. Isabella and Carlos had been polite, but their cold stares spoke louder than words. They didn't see her as a suitable match for their son. And now this letter and message, like knives stabbing her already fragile world. Miguel, sitting behind the wheel, glanced at her with concern. "You're quiet. Did something happen at dinner? Mom and Dad can seem strict, but they'll get used to you, I promise." Lila clutched the purse containing the ill-fated envelope and forced a smile. "Everything's fine. I'm just tired." But her voice faltered, and Miguel noticed. "Lila, you know you can tell me anything, right?" he said gently, placing his hand on her knee. She looked at him, his warm brown eyes, his slightly tousled hair, the sincerity in every word. Miguel was her anchor, the person who had pulled her out of her gray, everyday life. But how could she tell him about Sunrise? About how she had been accused of theft, even without any evidence? She was afraid he would start to doubt her, that his love wouldn't survive such a blow. And yet she couldn't keep quiet. The blackmailers knew too much, and their next letter could reach him first. Lila took a deep breath. "Miguel, I need to tell you something. It's about my old job at the Sunrise Cafe." He frowned, but nodded for her to continue. Lila began slowly, choosing her words carefully, as if walking on thin ice. "A year ago, money went missing from the cash register. $500. I was accused, but I didn't take anything. It was the manager, Victor Cruz. He wanted me to sign some papers to cover up his schemes. I refused, and that's when it all started. I was fired, but there was no evidence against me, so I just left. I thought it was the end. And today, I got a letter." She took out the envelope and handed it to him. Miguel pulled the car over to the side of the road, took the letter, and read it. His face darkened. "Who wrote this? And why now?" "I don't know," Lila whispered, feeling tears welling up in her throat. "But they're watching me. After dinner, I got a message saying that if I didn't tell you, they would do it themselves." Miguel gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "This is blackmail. Lila, why didn't you tell me? I would have helped you." She lowered her head. "I was afraid. You and your family. You're so different. I didn't want you to think badly of me." He took her hand. "I believe you. But we need to find out who's doing this and what they want." His voice was firm, but Lila saw a flash of doubt in his eyes. Her heart sank. What if he changed his mind? The next morning, Lila decided to take action. She recalled everything she knew about Victor Cruz. He was in his 40s, balding, with a sharp gaze and a manner of speaking that made everyone around him feel indebted. At Sunrise, he wasn't just a manager. He ran the place as if it belonged to him. Lila had seen him counting the takings in the back room and slipping some into his pocket, but she had kept quiet for fear of losing her job. When she refused to sign a false report, he flew into a rage. "You'll be sorry, girl," he had said, and now his words sounded like a prophecy. Could it be him? But how did he find out about her engagement to Miguel? She drove to downtown Miami, to the building where Sunrise used to be. The cafe had closed several months ago, but Lila hoped to find some kind of clue. At the entrance, where a bright sign had once hung, there was now only peeling paint. She noticed an old man selling newspapers on the corner. "Excuse me, do you know what happened to the manager of this cafe?" "His name was Victor Cruz," she asked. The old man squinted. "Cruz? I heard he's working in a bar in South Beach now. They say he got kicked out for shady dealings." Lila thanked him and wrote down the address. Her heart was beating faster. This was the first clue. But on her way home, she felt someone's eyes on her again. She turned around and saw the same man in the gray jacket who had been following her yesterday. He was standing at the traffic light, pretending to look at his phone, but his eyes were fixed on her. Lila quickened her pace, turned into an alley, and hid behind a trash can. The man walked past, looking back, and she caught a glimpse of his face, thin, with a short beard and a scar above his eyebrow. Who was he? And why wasn't he leaving her alone? Her phone vibrated again. A new message. You're running, but it won't help. Tell Miguel the truth, or we'll tell his parents. You have 2 days. Lila clenched her teeth. They knew where she was, what she was doing. It wasn't just a threat. It was a trap. That evening, she met Miguel in Watson Island Park. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. I talked to my father, he began, staring at the water. He asked if you had any problems in the past. He said his friends had heard something about Sunrise. Lila, they're getting to him. She froze. Did you tell him? Her voice trembled. No, but he found out on his own. He has connections. And he wants me to be careful. Lila felt the ground slip away beneath her feet. You don't trust me. Miguel hesitated. I want to believe you, but if it's true, my family won't forgive the scandal. His words cut like a knife. She understood. He loved her, but the pressure of his world was stronger. That night, Lila didn't sleep. She sat by the window, looking at the city lights, and remembered how it all began. A year ago, at sunrise, Victor had caught her in the back room. You could earn more if you didn't stick your nose where it doesn't belong, he said, slipping her a wad of cash. She refused, and the next day the takings were missing. She was summoned to the cafe owner, but the cameras had accidentally not recorded anything. Victor looked at her with a smirk as she gathered her things. Now she understood. He hadn't forgotten. This was revenge. In the morning, she received another message. South Beach, Luna Bar. Come alone, or Miguel will find out everything. Lila clutched her phone. It was a call. She knew Victor was there and that it was dangerous, but there was no turning back. She put on her jacket, grabbed a voice recorder, just in case, and drove to South Beach. The Luna Bar was a noisy place with neon signs and crowds of tourists. Lila entered, looking around, and saw Victor behind the bar. He was pouring a cocktail, but his gaze immediately caught hers. Well, hello, Lila, he said with a venomous smile. Long time no see. The tension hung in the air like lightning before a storm. She knew that everything would be decided now. Lila stood at the bar of the Luna, feeling the buzz of the crowd around her dissolve into the tense silence of her own world. Victor Cruz looked at her with the same contemptuous smirk he had worn a year ago when she left the sunrise. His eyes, cold and sharp as knives, pierced her through and through. Well, Lila, you decided to show up after all. I thought you'd chicken out, he said, wiping his hands on a towel hanging over his shoulder. His voice was low, with a hint of mockery. Lila clutched the tape recorder in her jacket pocket, praying it wouldn't fail her. She had turned it on while she was still outside, hoping to catch at least one word that would give Victor away. What do you want? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Victor leaned closer, resting his elbows on the counter. You know what I want. You messed with me at sunrise. You refused to play by my rules, and I don't forgive that. Now you have a fiancé, a rich boy, right? You think I'm just going to fade into the background? Lila felt the blood rush to her face. I didn't steal anything, and you know it. You set me up. Victor laughed, short and sharp. Prove it. In the meantime, I can make sure your fairy tale with Miguel ends before it even begins. I have recordings, witnesses. Do you want his father to get a video of you stealing from the cash register? He emphasized the word stealing by tapping his finger on the counter. Lila swallowed. She knew there were no real recordings. The cameras had broken that day. But Victor could fake anything, and that was his weapon. How much do you want? I don't have any money, she said, hoping to buy some time. Victor narrowed his eyes. Money is trivial. I want you to understand who's in charge here. Get away from Miguel, quietly and without a fuss, or I'll tear your life to pieces. His words hit her like a slap in the face. It wasn't just revenge for her refusal. It was an attempt to break her, to destroy everything she had built. Lila clenched her fists. You're sick, she blurted out, and Victor just grinned wider. Maybe, but I'm winning. She left the bar, her knees shaking. South Beach was buzzing. Tourists laughed. Music poured out of open doors. But Lila felt trapped. The voice recorder had captured the conversation, but it wasn't enough. Victor hadn't said anything direct that could be used in court. She needed more. She sat down on a bench by the waterfront, staring at the dark waves of the ocean, and tried to collect her thoughts. Miguel was waiting for her at home, but his doubts were already undermining their relationship. His parents were pressuring him. and now Victor was threatening him. Lila knew that if she didn't find a way out, everything would fall apart. The next day, she went to Miguel's place. He opened the door to his apartment in Coconut Grove, and his face immediately tensed. "Where were you yesterday? I called you at midnight," he said, letting her in. Lila took a deep breath. "I was with Victor. He's behind all this." She told him about the bar, the threats, his plan to ruin their engagement. Miguel listened silently, but when she finished, his voice hardened. "You went to him alone? Lila, that's dangerous. What now? Can he really fake the video?" She nodded. "Maybe. And your parents, they already know something. If he sends them even the slightest hint, they'll make you break up with me." Miguel paced the room, rubbing his temples. "I don't want to lose you, but this is too much. My father said yesterday that if there are any problems, he'll call off the wedding." Miguel's words cut her to the heart. She could see him torn between his love for her and his duty to his family. "Do you believe me?" she asked quietly. He stopped and looked into her eyes. "I do, but I need time to figure out how to resolve this." Lila walked away from him with a heavy heart. Time was something she didn't have. Victor gave her 2 days, and the clock was ticking. That same evening, she noticed the man in the gray jacket again. He was standing outside her house, pretending to smoke, but his eyes were fixed on her windows. Lila realized that this was more than just surveillance. She dialed a taxi and went to her friend Emily, who rented a room in Brick Hill. Emily, a short girl with short blonde hair, was studying law and was always ready to help. "You're in big trouble," she said after listening to Lila's story over a cup of coffee. "This Victor is a blackmailer, but without evidence, we can't touch him. What do you have?" Lila took out her voice recorder and played the recording. Emily frowned. "He's careful. Nothing concrete. But if he fakes the video, that's a serious crime. We need to provoke him." An idea came quickly. Lila sent Victor a message from a new number. "I agree to leave Miguel. Let's meet tomorrow at Luna. Bring proof that you'll destroy the recordings." She knew he would take the bait. His ego wouldn't let him pass up a chance to show off. The next evening, she entered the bar again, with a voice recorder in her pocket and Emily sitting at the next table with her phone at the ready. Victor was waiting for her, holding a folder in his hands. "You decided? Smart girl," he said, throwing the folder on the counter. Lila opened it. There were screenshots from the Sunrise cameras showing her allegedly taking money from the cash register. The forgery was crude, but it looked plausible to the uninitiated. "This is fake, and you know it," Lila said, trying to speak louder. Victor shrugged. "Who cares? The main thing is that they believe it. I've already made arrangements with a guy. He'll take it to Ramirez tomorrow, and you'll disappear from their lives." Lila clutched the recorder in her pocket. "Did you bribe someone at Sunrise to cook this up?" Victor smirked. "You're smart. Juan, the bartender, did it all for a couple $100. What are you going to do? Run to the police? You don't have anything on me." He was wrong. She had the recording, and now he had named a name. Lila stood up. "See you, Victor." He just laughed after her. Emily was waiting for her on the street, her eyes burning. "You got him." He mentioned Juan and the fake. "That's evidence." Lila nodded, but inside she was trembling. Victor was confident of his impunity, and that made him dangerous. She remembered the man in the gray jacket. He was nearby again, watching. "That's his detective," she told Emily. "He's been following me from the beginning." Emily frowned. "Then we need to hurry. If Victor realizes you recorded him, he'll strike first." Lila knew she was playing with fire. She had the recording, but it might not be enough. She needed Juan, the man Victor had bribed. If he talked, she would have a chance. But how could she find him? And how could she convince him when he was more afraid of Victor than she was? The tension grew with every passing minute. Victor was close to destroying her life, and Miguel was still hesitating. Lila clutched her phone, dialing Emily's number. "We need a plan, fast." The game was just beginning, and the stakes were too high to lose. Lila sat in a small coffee shop on the outskirts of Brick Hill, nervously fingering the rim of her paper cup of cold coffee. Across from her, Emily scrolled through notes on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The morning after her meeting with Victor at Luna was gray and muggy, as if the very air of Miami was pressing down on Lila, reminding her that time was running out. The recording of her conversation with Victor was in her pocket. The tiny voice recorder was her only hope. But Emily's words from last night still echoed in her head. "That's not enough. The court needs witnesses, not just hints." Juan, the bartender from Sunrise, was the key. If he confirmed that Victor had bribed him to falsify evidence, Lila would have a chance. But how could she find him? And how could she get him to talk? Emily looked up from the screen and looked at Lila. "I found him. Juan Martinez. He worked at the Sunrise until it closed, then moved to a bar on Ocean Drive. He's there now, according to social media." Lila nodded, feeling her pulse quicken. "He might deny everything. Victor said he paid him, but Juan will be scared if he finds out I'm against him." Emily frowned. "Then we need something to hook him with. Victor's threat is one thing, but if he realizes the police might come after him, he'll talk. Are you willing to take that risk?" Lila pressed her lips together. Taking a risk was her only option. "Yes." Let's go to his place. The bar on Ocean Drive was a noisy place with bright signs and the smell of salty air from the ocean. Lila and Emily went inside, trying not to attract attention. Juan was standing behind the bar, a thin guy in his mid-20s with dark hair and a nervous look. He was wiping glasses, but his movements were sharp, as if he was expecting trouble. Lila moved closer, feeling her heart pound. "Juan, we need to talk," she said quietly but firmly. He flinched and looked at her. "I don't know you. What do you want?" he muttered, looking away. "I'm Lila Garcia. I used to work at Sunrise, and I know that Victor paid you to fake the records against me." Juan froze, the glass in his hands almost slipping out. "What are you talking about?" "I didn't do anything," he said, but his voice trembled. Lila took a step closer. "I have a recording. Victor admitted that you helped him. If I give it to the police, they'll come after you. But if you tell the truth, I'll help you avoid trouble." Juan turned pale, his eyes darting around the bar as if looking for a way to escape. "You don't understand. Victor, he's not joking. If I talk, he'll get me." Emily intervened, her voice calm but authoritative. "And if the police prove that he's a blackmailer, he'll go to jail. You choose, Victor or the law." Juan clenched his fists, then nodded. "Okay, but not here. Let's meet tonight, in the park by the pier." Lila left the bar feeling like she had taken a step forward, but she couldn't shake her uneasiness. One could change his mind, and Victor could find out about her plan. She called Miguel to tell him about her progress, but he responded coldly. "My father called this morning. He said someone sent him a letter about Sunrise." "Lila, I don't know how long I can hold them off." Her heart sank. "Miguel, I'll figure it out. I'll prove my innocence." He sighed. "I want to believe you. Just hurry." The conversation left a bitter taste in her mouth. She understood that his love was cracking under the pressure of his family, and if she didn't defeat Victor, she would lose everything. That evening, Lila and Emily waited for Juan in the park at South Point Pier. Dark waves crashed nearby, and streetlights cast a faint glow on the benches. Juan arrived, looking around nervously. "I didn't want this," he began, sitting down next to her. "Victor said he'd just scare you. He paid me $200 to alter the old camera footage. I didn't think he'd go this far." Lila turned on the recorder, trying not to scare him away. "Can you prove it?" Juan nodded. "I have a copy of the original before I altered it. I kept it, just in case." He handed her the flash drive, his hands shaking. "Just don't tell Victor it was me." Emily took the flash drive and immediately inserted it into her laptop. A video appeared on the screen. Lila at the cash register at Sunrise, not taking any money. It was her alibi. "This will save me," Lila whispered, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. But her joy was short-lived. A man in a gray jacket emerged from the shadows, the same detective who had been following her. "Good work, Lila," he said with a smirk. "But Victor knows you're here. He's not stupid." Lila jumped up, her heart pounding. "Are you working for him?" The detective shrugged. "I work for money. He pays me, I watch him. And right now, he's on his way here." Emily grabbed her laptop. "We have to go. Juan, are you coming with us?" He nodded, pale as a ghost. They ran to Emily's car, parked at the park entrance. Lila looked back. Headlights flashed in the distance, approaching too quickly. Victor was close. They jumped into the car, and Emily sped off while Juan whispered, "He'll kill me if he finds out." Lila squeezed his shoulder. "He won't make it. We're going to the police. Now." They drove to the police station in downtown Miami, where Emily immediately asked to speak to the officer on duty. Lila handed over the recording and the flash drive, explaining everything: the blackmail, the forgery, the threats. The officer, an elderly man with a tired look, nodded. "If this is true, we'll start an investigation. But you'd better stay away from this, Cruz." While the police were checking the evidence, Lila noticed a message from Victor. "You'll regret this." Her hands trembled, but she knew she couldn't back down. The next day, a detective in a gray jacket came to the station himself. "Victor wanted me to bribe someone here, but I didn't agree to that," he said, handing over his correspondence with Victor. It turned out that Victor had panicked and tried to cover his tracks, but only got himself deeper into trouble. The police summoned Victor for questioning, and Lila realized that he had made a mistake that would ruin him. That evening, she met Miguel at his house. He looked exhausted but hugged her tightly. "My father got the fake video, but I told him to wait." "Did you really go to the police?" Lila nodded. "Yes, and I have proof. Victor will answer for everything soon." Miguel looked into her eyes, and for the first time in days, there was no doubt in his gaze. "You're stronger than I thought." "I'm sorry I hesitated." Lila smiled, feeling the weight lift off her shoulders. She had risked everything, but now the truth was on her side. All that remained was to wait for the outcome, and she knew that justice was close. Lila stood at the window of her apartment, looking out at Miami in the morning. The sun was rising above the horizon, bathing the city in golden light, but her heart was beating unevenly. Today was the day of Victor Cruz's trial. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind. Police interrogations, meetings with Emily, endless calls from Miguel. She had handed over all the evidence, The recording of the conversation at Luna, the original video from Juan, the testimony of the detective who had switched sides. The police had worked quickly, and Victor hadn't had time to escape. Now he was sitting in the courtroom, and Lila was waiting for the verdict that would decide her fate. Emily picked her up in her car, and they drove to the courthouse in the city center. "Are you ready?" her friend asked, giving her an encouraging look. Lila nodded, but inside she was trembling. "I just want this to be over. I want him to answer for everything." Emily squeezed her hand. "He will. We have ironclad evidence." The courtroom was quiet, only the rustling of papers and muffled voices breaking the silence. Lila sat down next to Emily, trying not to look at Victor. He was wearing a cheap suit, his face unshaven and his gaze cold, but now he didn't have the confidence he had before. One was there too, pale and silent, ready to testify. The judge, a woman with a stern face and a strict voice, began the hearing. The prosecutor presented the evidence: a recording of Victor bragging about the forgery, a video from Juan proving Lila's innocence, and correspondence with the detective in which Victor offered to bribe the police. Juan took the stand, his voice trembling, but he told everything: how Victor had paid him to forge the documents, how he had threatened him if he refused. "I didn't want to, but I needed the money," he concluded, lowering his head. The detective confirmed. "Cruz hired me to follow her, and then he wanted me to forge more evidence. I refused when I realized he had gone too far." Victor's lawyer tried to wriggle out of it, claiming that the recordings could have been edited, but the judge interrupted him. "We have the original files and witness statements. Your arguments are unconvincing." Victor remained silent, clenching his fist under the table. Lila could feel the tension in the courtroom mounting. When the prosecutor finished, the judge announced a recess. Lila went out into the hallway, where Miguel was waiting for her. He hugged her without saying a word, and for the first time in days, she felt the warmth of his support. "I'm here," he whispered, and she nodded, burying her face in his chest. An hour later, the judge returned with the verdict. Victor Cruz is found guilty of blackmail, tampering with evidence, and attempting to bribe public officials. The sentence is 4 years in prison and a fine of $50,000. The courtroom erupted. Victor jumped up, shouting something about injustice, but he was quickly led away. Lila closed her eyes, feeling tears running down her cheeks. It was a victory, not just over Victor, but over everyone who had tried to break her. Emily patted her on the shoulder. "You did it, legally and fairly." Lila smiled through her tears. "I couldn't have done it without you." A surprise awaited her outside the courthouse. One approached, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. "I'm sorry, Lila. I didn't mean to set you up. Thank you for giving me a chance to make things right." She looked at him, tired but sincere. "You did the right thing in the end. That's what matters." He nodded and left, and Lila realized that even in this story, there was light. One had chosen the truth, just like she had. That evening, Miguel drove her to Coral Gables to see his parents. Isabella and Carlos were waiting in the living room, their faces tense. Lila braced herself for more accusations, but Carlos spoke first. "We saw the news. You proved your innocence. That's impressive." Isabella added, more gently than usual, "We were wrong, Lila. I'm sorry we doubted you." She held out her hand, and Lila shook it, feeling the lump in her throat dissolve. Miguel smiled. "I told you, she's special." For the first time ever, Lila felt accepted. A week later, she started a new job as an assistant at a marketing firm in downtown Miami. It was a modest start, but for Lila, it was a step toward independence. She was no longer the frightened girl who was afraid of every little noise. That evening, Miguel invited her to dinner at a small restaurant on Biscayne Bay. They sat by the window, looking out at the water, where the city lights were reflected. "I'm proud of you," he said, taking her hand. "You didn't give up, even when I doubted you." "I'm sorry for that." Lila shook her head. "You stayed with me. That's what matters." He took a box out of his pocket and opened it. Inside, a ring sparkled, simple but elegant. "I wanted to do this sooner, but I waited until everything settled down. Lila Garcia, will you marry me?" Her heart stopped, then began to beat faster. "Yes," she whispered, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. They kissed under the gaze of the other patrons, and Lila felt, for the first time in her life, that everything was in its place. A month passed. Lila stood in front of the mirror in her apartment, trying on a dress, not the fancy one she wore to Miguel's parents' dinner, but a simple white one for their engagement. She smiled at her reflection, now sincerely, without a trace of fear. Victor was behind bars. His schemes had collapsed like a house of cards. One had started a new life, and the detective, as it turned out, had returned the money to Victor and left town. Lila had won honestly, without revenge, relying only on the truth and the law. That was her strength. Miguel came into the room, hugged her from behind, and whispered, "You're beautiful." She turned to him, feeling the warmth of his hands. "We're beautiful together." They went out onto the balcony and looked at the lights of Miami. The city was bustling below, but for Lila, It had become something else, a place where she had found herself. The past was behind her, and ahead of her lay a wedding, a new job, and a life she would build for herself. She knew that justice didn't always come easily, but it was worth fighting for. And now, with a ring on her finger and Miguel by her side, Lila was ready for anything. Her story was starting over, with a clean slate and a clear conscience.